Welcome to the only show about the system by people who lived it. This is Inside Story.
I care about the healing. I care about the humanizing of people who are incarcerated. This is greater than the music.
There's a long history of music being a way for people in prison to build futures for themselves once they got out.
Their testimony was flawed.
When you go in a courtroom, you can be lied to, and it's okay for them to lie to you. Nothing happens to them, and nobody knows the truth.
Over the years, investigators linked people to crimes using all sorts of questionable forensics. Blood spatter, bite marks, and so on. These methods were eventually debunked, but overturning the cases they were used on is a different story.
So we're going right now to the scene of the crime.
Yes, we are.
Have you been back there?
No, I have not.
Derry Nelson didn't live on Lamont Street for long, but the block has had an outsized impact on his life. In February of 1985, police found the body of a man named Robert Nichols at a home here. The murder was eventually pinned on Nelson, who was sentenced to 42 years to life in prison.
Familiar? Not really.
Not really, no.
2 years ago, he was exonerated after spending almost 4 decades behind bars.
So you lived here for 1 month.
Yes, about a month, about six weeks, and that was it. Wow. Heck of a thing to come back to a place like this.
There was little to no evidence tying Nelson to the scene at the time of the shooting, but investigators had found a hair on Nelson's coat, as well as multiple hairs on the victim's clothing.
They got an order, when I say they, I mean the government, for me to take 20 strands of hair out of my head. I had to pull 20 pieces, not big sections, it couldn't be broken off. The root had to be showing.
Did they explain why?
They said for hair analysis.
Nelson soon learned that it would become a crucial part of the government's case against him.
They had a star witness. He was an expert, they called him, by the name of Michael P. Malone, who worked for the FBI. He said that he tested my hair and it fell into a certain category of 1 in 5,000, and I was at 1. And I couldn't say, he's lying, because how can I disprove science? How? I'm not a scientist. I don't even know the things that he said he does as a profession. I can't combat that. The lawyer couldn't either.
Inside Story reached out to Malone multiple times. He didn't reply to requests for comment. Expert testimony like the one used in Nelson's case grew in popularity in the late 1970s after the FBI published a manual outlining how forensic experts could match hairs found at crime scenes to suspects. At the time, DNA analysis was not yet possible, so other forensics, like hair comparison, were heavily relied upon in the 1980s and early 1990s. The FBI even set up training courses for local and state investigators to use it around the country. But as hair analysis spread, so did concerns with its reliability, including from within the FBI itself.
All these sort of pattern analysis forensics have become questionable.
Renee Ebersole has been reporting for years on the government's widespread use of the now discredited practice.
In the early 90s, an FBI chemist named Fred Whitehurst started asking questions and raising issues at the FBI about sloppy work and about testimony that he thought was problematic. And he elevated his complaints to the Inspector General. And that opened up some investigations into the FBI crime lab to see what was going on there. And they found problems. Most of the hair analysts, their testimony was flawed in 96% of the cases that were reviewed.
When these analysts are expressing certainty about these comparisons that is not backed by science, what sort of things are they saying?
They would say things like, it's very rare that I can't tell the difference between two hairs from two different suspects. And this was a script that was used by the FBI.
In 2000, the FBI changed its hair analysis policy, limiting it to preliminary screenings and requiring that it be backed up by DNA testing. The agency has also since admitted that there were foundational problems with the practice, namely that you cannot match a hair to a particular person. But the FBI never notified defendants whose convictions were affected by hair microscopy. Today, that work is being done at the state level. In Colorado, the state's Bureau of Investigation, or CBI, has partnered with the Corey Weiss Innocence Project to review 51 cases where hair analysis was used to secure convictions.
He wants resolution in his case, but he's getting more zen about it.
Judd Loans and his team at the Innocence Project are currently focusing on 5 of them.
We began pouring through those cases to look for ones where the hair microscopy made a difference in the case and the defendant had a strong claim of innocence. And from that group of cases, we're litigating in court and, when possible, negotiating with district attorneys for DNA testing.
When you say made a difference in the case, what does that mean?
Oftentimes, that hair is the only physical evidence in the case, and so it ties the whole case together and makes a conviction much more likely.
One of Loans' cases is a high-profile 1994 murder.
Tom and Christina Holler had just gotten home when 2 men approached them demanding money and their car keys. One of them shot and killed Tom Holler. Also in the alley where the Hollers' car was found was a white t-shirt on which there was a hair.
2 people were convicted. One of them, Stephen Harrington, largely based off of hair analysis presented by 2 experts who had been trained by the FBI.
So this is one of the supervisors in the CBI lab back in 1994. And he's testifying, this hair is unique. Based on this uniqueness, I would find it highly improbable that this hair could have come from anybody else in the random population. And that's the strongest conclusion I can make as a hair examiner in this particular case. And then the prosecutor asks him, have you ever had a stronger finding than that? Answer, no, I've never had a stronger finding than that, highly probable.
Highly probable is just so imprecise.
Yes.
Harrington has spent the past 30 years in prison. The first 15 of those were in solitary confinement. He's now at Sterling Correctional Facility, a couple hours outside of Denver.
This is a free call from an incarcerated individual at Sterling Correctional Facility. You may start the conversation now.
Harrington, who's always maintained his innocence, has long questioned how the hair could have been tied to him.
When they took my hair, I'm thinking, shit, you know, this is gonna help me. And feeling like, okay, well let's test the shit, you know, get on with it, you know. That's what I felt then.
Right, you must have been like, all right, this will show that it's not mine.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I knew it was bullshit from the gate, though, man, as far as bullshit goes. You know, I'm talking about back in the 90s when I was, you know, facing a jury and they blowing the shit forth. I knew it was bullshit right then. You know, I've been living with it for the last 30 years, you know?
Harrington and Loans are currently waiting to conduct DNA testing, which they believe will show that the hairs used to convict Harrington aren't actually his.
And I've been living with it, you know, reaching out everywhere that I can, calling people, writing people, trying to tell my story, man, you know, looking for someone who would listen.
Do you feel like you're being heard now?
Yeah, I definitely feel hopeful with the Innocence Project. You know, I feel like I do have a team of people that's, you know, determined to get my truth out there. And that feels good.
For Nelson, who was released 2 years ago, the fight isn't over yet. he still hasn't been compensated for the 4 decades he spent behind bars.
I just kept fighting and fighting, and I'm still fighting.
What are you fighting for?
That people know the truth about what happened to their loved ones, and the disparity. How when you go in a courtroom, you can be lied to by people who look a certain way and have a certain educational background, and it's okay for them to lie to you. Nothing happens to them.
There's still people who
right
are
now.
Yeah, who are in prison fighting for release, whose conviction was
and
based.
Nobody knows the truth. Their mothers heard in court that your son's hair was at the crime. It wasn't your son's hair, ma'am.
We all know Common. He's an Oscar, Emmy, and Grammy-winning artist. He's also an advocate for criminal justice reform and using music to heal. I sat down with him to learn more about his work in prisons. You performed in a prison in California, and you called a currently incarcerated person on stage. How was it like performing with him?
I never performed in a prison, but when I started to do those performances, I realized how powerful the music was to people. I had men come up to me and say, man, I'm 63 years old and I never been to a concert ever in my life. This was my first concert. And just, to see the joy, to see the emotion, to see them rocking with me, even for the cats who didn't know my music, they just, some brothers would say to me, like, man, for a while, I just forgot I was in prison. But I've been, like, to sing, some of the cats rocked on stage with me there. I definitely like bringing up brothers who, or sisters who are performers when we, at the prisons because, they can express themselves. And then for the people who are incarcerated to see somebody they know up there shining, it's another level,
Facts.
So it's been dope to have those life-changing experiences, life-enhancing experiences for me.
And you bring up Sing Sing. I saw that you performed there, and I lived in there for 9 years.
Yeah.
And some of the guys you was on stage. As a matter of fact, I knew everyone you was on stage. Every single one of them.
Yeah.
And they would tell me about the experience, and it means a lot to them to this day.
Yeah.
But I'm noticing a trend with you going to California prisons, New York prisons.
Yeah.
So what draws you to incarcerated people?
Man, I'm just like them. They human beings that, it's difficult to even to get to a point where you are being put in prison. You've been through something. I feel like it's my duty to extend whatever hand. And it's people working diligently to change what the system has been and what it has done to many men and women that have been incarcerated, especially Black and brown. And the system has done everything it could. I've seen people overcome that. You still gotta find some understanding. If somebody was incarcerated and they committed that crime, man, why don't we look at the system? What did the system do to improve that individual? How is the system working to heal the individual so that person can be in a place of redemption? That's like the highest level of humanity. And that's why I care about exposing the stories, working on the bills. I care about the healing. I care about the humanizing of people who are incarcerated. I just got on the train with the people that's doing the work and figured, well, how can I use the platform and the resources and the access and the respect that I have to bring light to people who are incarcerated, women and men.
No, you're doing a good job, bro.
Thank you,
Definitely
brother.
doing a good job.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
And you talk about Rebirth the Sound. Tell us what that is.
Yeah, so Rebirth the Sound is a program that we started in Stateville Prison, which is right outside of Chicago. And this program is where we set up a recording studio, and we have the brothers who are incarcerated in Stateville, usually 12 to 15, can participate each semester. And they participate by creating music, playing instruments. We have instructors who are teaching them engineering instruments. Everybody that's been a participant of Rebirth of Sound is like, this is greater than the music. Like, it's about coming together and like learning, healing. A lot of the pain is channeled through the art, and it doesn't solve every problem, but it definitely helps. I can tell you that from my experience. I can take the traumas I've been through and express them through music, express them through acting. So Rebirth the Sound has provided that platform for these brothers in Stateville, and we'll be opening our program up in California too.
Have there been a lot of musical gems that came out of that program?
I mean, lyrically, I've heard of some musical gems in the songs that have been incredible, but I think the biggest gem is like, man, when you hear people say, man, this is a miracle, I prayed for this, and it's here. And I actually get to hear my voice. People are like, I never heard my voice before. And they hearing their voice on a song. And the healing that I'm talking about, it's like, that's the gems. That's the biggest music gems.
Some of the participants in your Rebirth of Sound program, they can earn time off their sentence for participating. In your wildest dream, did you ever envision your program having that kind of impact?
Because our program is respected and has value, it can also add to being able to get out. We worked on getting some bills passed, and we got a bill passed in California.
Which one?
It was SB 251. It was basically for juveniles won't be able to be sentenced to life without parole. But we worked on this bill, and we went to the Capitol, and we sat and we talked with all these politicians, Republicans and Democrats. So for us to get those bills passed was like, for me, one of the greatest things I've been a part of in life, you know? Cool. And so is Rebirth the Sound, knowing that what it's doing for individuals and also like will affect their sentencing in a positive way.
Right. Yeah, I can feel your passion. Were you around the street life when you was a kid?
My mother, put it this way, she worked hard enough to get me in a private school, but I still was around cats that was doing stuff.
I can do
And
that.
I was in with them at certain times. And I did meet young people that were locked up for 300 years who were in situations like I was in, where somebody was shooting and you were in the like you around it. You in the car or whatever. And actually, I come across somebody who I grew up with and around in Stateville prison who had committed a murder right next door to my house. And he, I see him in Stateville prison with Rebirth the Sound, and he's just a new individual, like just a new person. Just a changed and evolved human being. It's bigger than the music, but it's Rebirth the Sound.
All right, cool. Well, man, thank you, man.
Respect, brother.
Thank you for coming through. I appreciate it,
Yes,
man.
sir.
There are countless talented musicians currently behind bars, but it's very hard to get their music to the public. It wasn't always this way. There's a long history of music being a way for people in prison to build futures for themselves once they got out. And as radio swept the country in the early 20th century, many Americans could tune in to hear this music. In the 1930s, a Texas prison broadcast a weekly show featuring incarcerated performers called 30 Minutes Behind the Walls. It reached 5 million listeners and got 100,000 fan letters. These bands also played at an annual prison rodeo. In the 50s, a doo-wop group called the Prisonaires recorded at Sun Studios in Memphis. One of their biggest fans was Elvis Presley. Producers from Motown and other labels worked to get into prisons, bringing microphones to record funk and soul acts like Ike White and the Escorts. Officials in Pennsylvania let members of a band called the Power of Attorney leave their prisons hundreds of times to play concerts and go to industry parties. They even opened for Stevie Wonder. But the era of mass incarceration changed all that. As violent crime went up, sentences got longer, and prisons got fuller. These musical opportunities disappeared. But the power of prison music goes beyond just helping people inside. It can transform those outside too, helping them see incarcerated people as capable of redemption and rehabilitation.
prepaid collect call from an incarcerated individual. This call is subject to recording and monitoring.
I dream of that family time. I dream of being home with the kids and just doing little things like movie time. And enjoy time with my wife at home.
I dream about the outside world. I dream about freedom. I dream about all the little things that I miss. And I dream about, like, the opposite sex, women. I dream about, like, going out and being successful. Just things that I see myself doing that I yearn for, and I think I kind of get that. The dream kind of gives me that to kind of, like, satisfy me for now, you heard?
I don't really remember half the shit I dream about. I don't have vivid dreams like that when I wake up, I remember, oh shit, it's very rare. And when I do have those type of dreams, it usually is about some type of bodily harm coming to me.
I think I dream a lot about prison. I think that's kind of because my world is surrounded by prison, obviously. I don't know if maybe my subconscious is even trapped in here after so many years. I'm not really sure. I've noticed that lately, though, that a lot of my dreams are usually in jail or surrounding around jail.
Like a lot of you out there, I've always liked watching those CSI-type crime shows. You know, the ones where the detective suddenly discovers a spot of blood or a hair follicle and holds it up with "got him" in his eyes. In those shows, the cops always get their guy. The suspect becomes a convict. In the pen, we had a different definition for the word suspect. It meant something or someone we didn't trust. You better watch that dude, he's suspect. That CO's promise to let you shower tomorrow is suspect. You get it. As we saw in this episode, old-fashioned hair science doesn't just get suspects, it is suspect. I wonder how many people watching this are incarcerated based upon the weight that fake science was given at their trials. A lot of them suspected something was wrong, they just didn't know exactly what. Well, I'm sure this episode will put batteries in their backs to get the justice they seek. Thanks for watching.